Hi Ram, how are you?
I'm good, Sriji. How are you? Good to catch up with you after a while.
Yes, Ram. So nice to get in touch with you after this long. Ram, I would just like to pick your head on a thought that was coming into my mind. Probably, I would like to pick your brain on how to agree to disagree with people who are close to us. Right? Many times we get into situations where we have got intense debates, and how much ever we try to persuade to put our point through to the other side, or how much ever the other side tries to put their point through us, genuinely, both of us may be convinced that no, I'm right. And the other person may be equally convinced that he or she is correct. And sometimes, this disagreement, if we don't develop the knack of handling it, can be potential bitter experience, if I can call it that way.
Mhm.
How do we deal with such situations, especially in the season that we are, having right now? The Indian general election results are due to be out tomorrow. That is
Mhm.
the 4th of June 2024. And out in social media, there is so much of outrage. Good friends otherwise are debating on their own political heroes, agreeing and disagreeing on a lot of things and hinging onto their points. And it is perhaps hot everywhere. More than the politicians, I believe common man is in much more heat because of election and election results. I thought this would be apt to use this time to pick your head and Gyan on how to agree to disagree and how to take conflicts in a soft manner without losing one mental peace to the interpersonal relationships that we have developed. By the way, people, I have voted. You see, yeah. Go ahead, Ram. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think what is also making it worse, right, is I think the weather is also pretty hot. I think everything is hot around us right now. And in fact, there
Yeah,
was
it
there
is
was some
hottest in Chennai.
hottest in China. It's always hot, hot, or hottest. And I think there was actually
Yes.
a psychological study that was done several years ago to see what are the various things that make people act up a very aggressive manner or specifically road rage, right? So when they studied how people behave when they are stuck in traffic in a car, when there is a peak of summer and probably not so hot days. And it was actually found that the heat has an impact. So I think there is heat outside, there is also a lot of heat inside. Anyway, jokes apart, uh, I think you started out quite well. And I think you pointed out one of the things, right? Number one, how do I persuade the other person to take my viewpoint, right? So that is one thing that
Yeah.
you mentioned. How do I make sure that I kind of have a conviction that I am right and or this is probably my view is more logically out there. It's more reasoning based, while the other person is probably emotional, and probably the other person thinks of it like that as well, right? So, and you brought up a very important point. There are often times when friends get caught in this kind of a debate, and then quite often they kind of lose the objectivity that is very necessary for this conversation, and they kind of end up feeling that level of resentment, right? So if we can probably look at these three as the key aspects of any kind of a heated debate, right? Be it political, I think it's given the times that we are in, I think it's a very relevant trigger, I would say, of this. But I guess the underlying human factor is the same. Number one, I think it's just one thing that we have to enter any conversation with is a mindset that we're just kind of exchanging views. That's actually a very easy way to make sure that we watch out for everything else, right? Because if we go on thinking that this is about establishing a point of view, this is about putting our points across in a more persuasive and stronger manner, where we believe that the other person will actually take our viewpoint, right? Half the times we become upset or angry with a particular situation or scenario only because we have a kind of a hope or a preconceived belief that whatever I say will be taken without resistance, right?
Yes, very
So
fine.
I can
Yeah.
probably maybe a bit of a digression, right? So uh, normally we see that when you have children at home, and then typically the parents go out or they're working or something and they come back, and let's say there is a lot of stuff that's lying around in the house. That is how children are, right? They're very curious, they're very explorative, right? And the parents come initially, they say, you know what, you have to keep the house clean, don't litter, and it's keep it clean, right? And then somehow, yeah, that's what we must teach them, obviously. But it takes a long time for the brain circuits to develop where the children understand the importance of cleanliness. It can go deep into teens, even I mean, even farther than teens in most cases. So um, when the parent come home after a few days, right? Somewhere they are hoping that whatever message they have given the children is heard, it is internalized or embodied, right? And children are going to leave the house clean. But the moment they come in, even assuming it is better than what it was in the previous few days, instead of 20 books or toys lying on the floor, it's only four or five, because they had a hope that the house will be spick and span, right? They get mad at the children. Likewise, I think that kind of comes from a position of having a hope, being hopeful or having a hope for something that is less likely to happen, right? So that is how we deal with our own family, because we have certain values, we have certain beliefs. At the heart of it all is a set of beliefs that we have, values that we have, and we always hope that our values and beliefs have gotten across, whether it is children, whether it is adults, and then we believe that it will be taken. We go with the hope or the belief that people will take everything we say without resistance, and that hope is actually what angers us in the first place when somebody presents an alternate point of view. And actually, it might sound paradoxical, but the more logical, the more compelling an argument the opposite party presents, right, the more dissonance we feel within ourselves, because we feel that our position is threatened by something that is as sound as what we are presenting. And so we try to push back much more, right? It's not always that, we try to go, we make an assertion in a situation, we are faced with a response, and it is not always that if the response is unfavorable, we take a moment's pause to reflect and see how we can kind of fork away from being what do you call bringing about redundancy in the behaviors where we try to keep doing the same thing and expect better results. Instead, we don't always do that, right? We always try to defend our position sometimes, because that is like the automatic response that we have. Yeah, you have a question?
In fact, Ram, without interrupting you much, if I can say, that's one of the fundamentals of communication, right? When I communicate something, my first expectation is I am heard across, right? So, in terms of debates or disagreements, the very fundamental assumption takes a hit. Correct, Ram? Am I,
No, that's a beautiful.
is it?
That's actually a very good, very very good question, which is going to give direction to this conversation. Otherwise, I would have gone on and on. So thanks for that. So the word communication itself, right? If we trace back the roots of the word, it comes from communis, which means which means to have something common or form something common in between two people. And oftentimes, unfortunately, because we don't understand the intent of communication, which is to kind of establish something common. Let's say you and I are talking now, right? The idea is to establish something common between us so the communication can go on. But if we start arguing on this, right, then it's kind of goes against the spirit of communication, right? So that is what it is
True.
about. The going by the uh, you know uh, meaning of the word communication, what it actually means is etymology, right? So if you go by that, it actually, the outcome that we are looking at is you need to have a good relationship at the end of having communication. That's actually the proof of the pudding, right? So you brought a beautiful point. We are going to have a communication with somebody. Let's forget the title of the communication. It could be a debate, it could be brainstorming, it could be opinion sharing, whatever it is, right? But we are going to have a communication, and you actually said something really nice. In the root of all, the desire to communicate is the desire to be heard, right? But being heard is one thing, right? Being agreed with or agreed to, people aligning with us is something entirely different. We tend to
Indeed.
conflict the two, right? And sometimes that is where, because we are not able to separate the two, we get into trouble saying, well, yeah, person heard me, but they have not agreed with me, so it's as good as not having heard.
Honestly, Ram, you have answered it beautifully. It didn't strike me. Yes, I can still be heard, but just because I'm heard doesn't mean I am agreed upon. Ram, it's very subtle. Hard to realize, Ram. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes that's what happens in most of our. I mean, typically when a conversation escalates into a debate or an argument, that's what happens, right? The one of the most common dialogues that we generally use is, "How many times should I tell you this? I've been telling you this from start." but you're not listening to me. So people are hearing things,
So,
but because they have a
correct.
canned response that's already there, they're even in the conversation they're saying, "I'm going to say this. This person is going to say this. This is how I'm going to respond." So regardless of what the first person says, the second person is already there to give the response, and they come out with it anyway. And they, when we say no, that's not what it is, right? I've been trying to tell you this 4 or 5 times. It is never heard even, right? So that is actually one part. The other part is, okay, how do we make this better? Number one is we should kill off any what do you call expectations. That's where we kind it always helps to go with an open minded to any conversation, saying, yeah, I have a viewpoint. Everybody has a viewpoint. And I was telling somebody recently, right? There is no there are most of the things that we believe are absolute truths are not absolute truths. For instance,
Correct.
you and I are never going to argue about uh, the fact that we have to breathe in order to be alive. Absolutely not. If I come and tell you, Sriji, we don't have to breathe in order to be alive, there is nothing to debate. I'm an idiot, that you can kick me out, right? So anybody can kick me out. But when we talk about various other topics, there is always perspective. The only thing
Yeah.
that the reason why we hold something to be very dear or as an absolute truth is because we believe in it strongly. It's a very strongly held personal belief. And when we have something like that, an opinion to the contrary is always seen as a threat to ourselves because it kind of strikes directly at the very core. So when we go into a conversation, it always helps to kind of temper our expectations, saying, "Yeah, I'm going in with a position. I think I have a sound reasoning behind why I'm taking the position." But there's always likelihood that there'll be a different point of view. Let's not grade it. This is another problem, right? Like, we don't have to grade everything that we do. We don't have to say, hey, this is better, mine is worse, mine is better, yours is worse. That's not necessary. You and I are different. We can have different views about the same thing. And sometimes,
Just another point.
yeah, and sometimes maybe I'll just add one more thing before your next question, right? And quite often, we don't consider the other person's frame of reference. So perspective is one thing, right? Your point of view is nothing, but where the point of view comes from is it's what we call as a frame of reference, right? So when somebody is really really, let's say, hungry, and I'm a full tummy, right? If we talk about, let's say, an object of food or something, I might be more indifferent to it than the other person. It's something very very simple, right? I mean, it might even sound stupid, but these are not typically, when I say no, 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 if I'm dismissive about food or something like that to a person who's actually very hungry, who doesn't have access to food, right? Then that person might go off on me, and I say, yeah, I can see your perspective. You like food. It's not about him or her liking food. They are hungry. That's their frame of reference. So for them, it's very very important or essential at the point in time. So likewise, in any conversations, there'll be a frame of reference. Typically, because you mentioned election season, somebody could choose a leader on the grounds that they might probably need the kind of promises on the manifesto that suits them or where they come from, which may not be really important for us, right? So they might keep the rest of the benefits out, or rest of the other parties' promises or agenda out, and then say, this is very important for me, so I support this person, right? So and that can again happen in relationships as well. So I mean, yeah, we can keep giving examples, but at the root of it all is two things. One, the point of view of the other person is important. The frame of reference of the other person is important, and that's where empathy becomes very very important, right? If we are able to
Right.
understand the other person, or rather appreciate the fact that the other person can have a point of view, and if we are able to sense that from the other person's point of view, probably won't have so many heartbreaks, heartburns, arguments, whatever.
So, that being said, Ram, that was a very good explanation. In fact, the key takeaways, in fact, in my opinion, is that don't grade your opinion. It
Mhm.
cannot be better. It need not be better. It need not be inferior. It is just your opinion. It is a bad opinion. That's one of the important takeaways. And the second takeaway is that perspective differs, right? Where I come from and where the other person comes from is totally different. And because there are different grounds, there are different opinions, they need not agree with each other. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Those are very interesting points that you told. And I really liked the way you differentiated between being heard to be completely different from being agreed upon. And usually, subconsciously, we take it for granted, both of them. Just because I'm heard, I think I'm agreed upon. Not. That was a very subtle difference that you brought out. So, these being said, Ram, I would like to take a couple of minutes of yours more to, take your help and advice on how do you train your mind? It cannot be like today I heard this podcast and
Mm,
suddenly I say, yeah, after I'm going to get myself ready for all the arguments. That can't happen. If that's going to be the case, then I'm going to fail.
right.
No, that's not the way forward. So can you give some tips on how do you train yourself to be patient and take the difference of opinions without getting personal, without affecting the relation?
Beautiful, absolutely. So I think this is one space where I guess we can learn a lot from sports, because most of these conversations we go in with a view that there are no ground rules. We can just talk whatever we want. Because I'll say, for example, you and I are getting into a contentious topic. I'll say, yes, Sriji is my friend, right? I can talk whatever I want. But sometimes the topic may merit a certain respect and acknowledgement that I should have for you and certain that you should have for me. So one of the good things that it helps, regardless of who it is, it might sound very formal, but trust me, it helps, is to have some kind of ground rules. Let's say, what, we'll talk about this for 10, 15 minutes, but beyond that, if it drags, let's just stop it. Right. The other thing is,
True.
both of us will not use words, the you or the finger pointing word, right? We'll probably say, I believe, I think, I
Yeah.
feel, instead of saying you are saying, you are implying. No, there is no need to, be accusatory in some of these conversations, right? And sometimes it is always good to kind of, say that it is again, going in with with the mindset that the other person can have a different point of view from ours, and it's perfectly human, because obviously, if somebody else has a different point of view from me, I'm also having a different point of view as compared to what they're saying in a given context. So if I can have a different point of view, somebody else can have a different point of view, and that's always why there are more than one things that we are debating about. Right? If everybody agreed on everything, we will only have one of everything. Right? We'll not have two of everything, so at least two or more. So I think these are certain things that we can go in with. The other thing we can do is we can always, maybe this selfish look, if I can call it. That's not really selfish, but yeah, in this context, let's call it like that, right? We can incentivize by seeing what our body responds to the whole thing. Like, are we feeling agitated? Right? Because sometimes if these things can trigger our stress response, we can have high heartbeat or fast heartbeat, or
Mm,
muscles might tighten. That discomfort will there, and
mm,
that will accentuate our frustration and our responses also, which will kind of go in a spiral, right? So the moment we are kind of going into a stress response, we can actually say, you know what, I'm feeling agitated. And if, let's say, you and I are in the heat of an argument, and you say that you're my friend, I'm going to obviously step back and kind of say, hey, your well-being is more important. So it's always good to watch out. And the other thing is, it comes with a lot of training and practice, but we have to be active listeners, in the sense, when you're telling me something, I have to absorb it entirely, right? Instead of already forming judgments in terms of what I must tell you. That is something that only comes with practice. But just very basic preparation is the acceptance that things, people might not agree with me. Uh, I should not blame anybody for a viewpoint. It is only a different viewpoint, because if I can have a different viewpoint, anybody else can. And seeing from the other person's frame of reference, or fundamentally going in with the readiness that the other person will have a frame of reference, right? So if I expect to come in and have an argument with you, and then you say, I believe 100% that, yeah, he's more likely to not agree with me and have some strong views. And even if we have a 20-30% common ground, it's always better than saying, I'm going to go there, say something, I'm going to hear just a yes, I'm coming back. But then the moment you say, yeah, I agree, but for having said that, and you follow second sentence, it's over. Then it kind of gets dragged out.
true.
So that's pretty
True.
much what we can do, Shriti, about the whole thing.
Nice. In fact, many of the suggestions that you gave are in perfect sync with the concept of democracy, right? 30 people had a choice, 32 people had different choice, 32 still wins, and the 30 get accepted for the next term until the, until the next election. Yes. So I think
Absolutely.
so when we are able to do it in public place, we should be able to do it between us, our friends, and our relatives too. So Ram, that was very informative session, very deep, and I think so. I did the justice of listening to you properly and asking the right set of questions.
And
Thanks a lot. Thanks for
sure, no problem. Anytime. It's always a pleasure. And I hope I listen to you actively enough to give some meaningful responses. And I hope it's useful for anybody who's going to listen to watch this video and listen to the content. So thank you so much. I think it was an awesome call. Yeah,
yeah.
great.
Good night.
Great, Shriji. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.